Hi, welcome to English Unlock the Oral Mastery. Think of this as your daily dose of inspiration, where learning English feels as a breeze and improving your life feels like home.
Yeah, and today we are taking you on a very specific, really practical journey.
We are going to a place you probably visit, well, every single week, maybe even multiple times a week.
Exactly. We're heading to the supermarket, but our mission today is entirely different from just buying groceries.
Right? Because we want to look at the supermarket through a completely new lens. We're going to show you how to turn this basic, everyday errand into your very own immersive language classroom.
It really is the perfect setting for language acquisition if you think about it. A supermarket is essentially a giant walk-through dictionary.
I love that description, a walk-through dictionary.
It is. Every single sign, every label on a shelf, and every interaction you have is a vocabulary lesson attached to a physical object. For adult learners, this is pure gold.
You don't need to sit at a desk with flashcards to memorize words. You just need to step through those sliding doors and, pay attention to the environment.
So today, we are going to walk you through that environment step by step. We'll analyze the exact vocabulary, the cultural nuances, and the specific phrases you need to sound completely natural.
And I really want to emphasize that natural aspect. We aren't just going to define words today. We are going to talk about how native English speakers actually use them.
But before we even get into the store, there is a crucial preparation step. Let's call it the golden rule of shopping.
Oh, yes. Before you even grab your keys or put on your shoes, you have to do one thing. You have to make a shopping list.
Now, obviously, a list prevents you from forgetting the milk or the bread. But from a language learning perspective, why is the physical act of writing a list so important?
It really comes down to cognitive priming. When you write your shopping list in English before you leave the house, you are actively switching your brain into English mode.
You are forcing yourself to recall the vocabulary you need without the visual cues of the store. Think about those basics you mentioned, milk and bread. By writing those words down, you are setting an intention.
So when you finally arrive at the store, your brain is already primed to recognize those words on the signs and labels. It bridges the gap between passive recall and active application.
That makes perfect sense. If you write bread on your list at home, when you see the word bread printed on a sign over aisle 3, your brain makes a much stronger, faster connection.
It's like you're giving yourself a sneak preview of the vocabulary test.
Exactly, and it helps you identify gaps in your knowledge in a safe environment. If you realize at home that you don't know the English word for a specific vegetable you want to buy, you can look it up before you go.
You are basically preparing your own personalized lesson plan for the trip.
Right. Okay, so you have your completely translated English shopping list in your hand. You arrive at the store, you walk up to those big glass doors, they slide open, and immediately you face the first major physical decision of your trip.
Are you going to use wheels or are you going to use a basket? Let's unpack the mechanics of this, starting with the larger option, the shopping cart.
The shopping cart. This is the large metal basket equipped with wheels. Now, the crucial thing for learners here is not just the noun cart, but the verb we instinctively pair with it.
Right, the collocation. The word that naturally goes with cart is push. You push a shopping cart. You do not drive it, you do not ride it, you push it.
Wait, I have heard some people use a different word for this, especially in British English or in different regions. Is cart strictly an American term?
That is a brilliant point. Yes, shopping cart or just cart is the standard North American term. If you were in the United Kingdom or Australia, you would likely hear this called a trolley.
But the physical action remains the same. You push it. And you choose this option when you have a long shopping list. The cart is designed for heavy loads.
For the weekly family grocery run, where carrying the items would be physically impossible.
So we push the cart, but what if I am just running in to grab a few things? What if my list only has 3 items on it? I don't want to maneuver a giant metal cart through a crowded store.
In that scenario, you bypass the carts and grab the second option, the shopping basket. A basket is the smaller, usually plastic container that you carry by hand.
And notice the verb shift there. You push a cart, but you carry a basket.
Yes, carry implies using your own physical strength to support the weight.
And because you are carrying it, there is a natural limit to how much you can buy. Your arm will literally start to hurt if you put too much into a basket. So the rule of thumb is long list equals push a cart. Short list equals carry a basket.
Precisely. And I encourage you, the listener, to visualize this the next time you walk into a store. Feel the weight of the basket on your arm and say the word carry in your head.
Or feel your hands on the handle of the cart and think the word push. Tying the physical sensation to the English verb helps lock it into your long-term memory faster than any textbook could.
I love that. Physical language learning. So let's say we have our cart. We've got a long list today. We push our cart past the entrance, and usually the very first area you encounter in a supermarket is the produce section.
This is easily my favorite part of the store just because of all the colors. But the word itself, produce, is fascinating because it behaves a little differently depending on how you use it.
We absolutely should break that down because this is a prime example of how English shifts depending on context. The word is spelled P-R-O-D-U-C-E.
When we use it as a noun to talk about the fresh fruits and vegetables in the supermarket, the stress or the heavy emphasis lands on the first syllable. P-R-O-duce, the produce section.
P-R-O-deuce. But if I am talking about a factory making cars, I wouldn't use that same pronunciation, would I?
No, you would not. If you are using it as a verb, meaning to make or create something, the stress shifts to the second syllable. Produce, factory produces its cars, but a farm grows P-R-O-duce.
These are called heteronyms, words that are spelled identically but sound different and have different meanings. For an adult learner, mastering that stress shift is a massive step towards sounding like a native speaker.
That is such a subtle but important detail. So we are standing in the P-R-O-duce section, surrounded by all the fresh fruits and vegetables. Let's look at the bananas.
When you buy bananas, you almost never just take one single banana. They are connected together at the top. What is the specific vocabulary word for that grouping?
The correct term is a bunch. You buy a bunch of bananas. This is a collective noun. In English, we have very specific collective nouns for different types of things. We have a flock of birds, a herd of cows, and in the supermarket, we have a bunch of bananas.
I've always wondered about that. Can I use bunch for other things in the produce section? Could I say, I'm going to buy a bunch of apples?
Usually no. Bunch typically refers to things that grow naturally fastened together, like bananas or grapes, or things that are tied together by the farmer, like a bunch of carrots with the leafy green tops still on, or a bunch of flowers.
Apples grow individually on branches, so they don't naturally form a bunch. Instead, you might buy a bag of apples or simply buy them loose.
Speaking of apples, this is a great place to practice our sensory adjectives. We have green apples and we have red apples right next to each other. They obviously look different, but they also have entirely different flavor profiles.
We rely on two key adjectives here, sour and sweet. The green apples, like a Granny Smith apple, are typically described as sour. Sour means it has a sharp, slightly acidic taste. If you bite into a lemon, your mouth puckers. That is the ultimate sour taste.
Exactly. You get that tingly feeling in your jaw when something is really sour.
Contrast that with the red apples, which are generally described as sweet. Sweet is the pleasant flavor of sugar or honey. What makes the produce section such a fantastic classroom is that you can practice these adjectives while looking at the physical objects.
You see the green apple and you mentally link it to the word sour. You see the red apple and link it to sweet. You are building a web of associations.
It's much more effective than just reading a list of opposites like hot and cold, sweet and sour. Okay, so we put a bunch of bananas and some sweet red apples into our cart. Next on our list are carrots.
Now, if they aren't tied together with the green tops, they usually come in plastic. We wouldn't call this a bunch, right?
Correct. In that case, you are buying a bag of carrots. Bag is a very common container word in English. And this brings us to a very important action verb in the produce section.
Sometimes items like apples or carrots are not sold in prepackaged bags with a set price. They are sold loose, and the price is determined by how heavy they are.
Right, so before you put them in your cart, you have to place them on the scale. And what is the verb for that action?
The verb is weigh. To weigh something means to measure its heaviness. Now, the spelling of this word is notoriously tricky for English learners. It is spelled W-E-I-G-H. The G and the H at the end are completely silent.
It sounds exactly like the word weigh, as in, which way do I go?
Exactly. They are homophones. They sound identical but have different spellings and meanings. When you place your bag of carrots on the scale, you are weighing them to see how much they cost.
Mastering this word, both in how it sounds and what it means in this context, is essential for supermarket fluency.
So we have weighed our produce, we have our sweet apples, our bunch of bananas, and our bag of carrots. The cart is getting a little heavier. It is time to leave the colorful produce section and move deeper into the store.
As we push the cart around the corner, you will physically feel a change in the environment. It suddenly gets cold, you might even shiver a little. That drop in temperature tells you that you have arrived at the dairy section.
The dairy section is climate controlled for a very specific reason. The word dairy refers to foods that are produced from the milk of mammals, primarily cows. This includes milk, cheese, butter, and yogurt.
We also usually find eggs in this section, even though they aren't technically dairy, because they require the same cold storage to prevent them from spoiling.
Let's focus on the milk first. We talked about a bag of carrots, but milk doesn't come in a bag, at least not typically in the United States. What is the vocabulary word for the container that holds milk?
The standard container is called a carton. A carton is usually made of thick, waxed paper or cardboard. You might buy a big carton of milk if you have a family, or a small carton if you live alone.
It is important to note that milk can also come in a plastic jug with a handle, but carton is a very standard, essential vocabulary word to know.
So we grab a big carton of milk. Next, we need eggs. And this is where the English language introduces a very specific, traditional unit of measurement. We don't usually walk up to the shelf and say, I need 12 eggs. There's a special word for that exact number.
The word is dozen. A dozen means exactly 12. This is a very old counting system, a base 12 system, that is still deeply embedded in the English language, particularly when it comes to food. When you buy eggs, the standard carton holds 1 dozen eggs.
This is a great point for learners to be careful with their prepositions. I often hear learners say, I bought a dozen of eggs. Is that correct?
It is a very common mistake, but no, it is not completely natural. You do not need the preposition of. You simply say, a dozen eggs. It functions almost like a number itself. Just as you wouldn't say 12 of eggs, you don't say a dozen of eggs.
That is a fantastic tip. A dozen eggs. But what if I live alone and I don't eat a lot of eggs? I don't want 12 to go bad in my fridge. Can I buy a smaller amount?
Yes, supermarkets usually offer a smaller size, and the vocabulary word for this is simply a half dozen. Since a dozen is 12, a half dozen is exactly 6 eggs.
Learning the terms dozen and half dozen is crucial because you will hear them constantly, not just for eggs, but for other baked goods like donuts or bagels.
Which is a perfect transition because speaking of baked goods, as we secure our half dozen eggs and our big carton of milk in the cart, our senses are engaged again.
We felt the cold of the dairy section, but now a completely different sense takes over, the sense of smell. You catch this incredible warm, yeasty aroma drifting through the air. You just follow your nose, and it leads you straight to the bakery section.
The bakery section is where all the fresh bread, cookies, muffins, and cakes are prepared and sold. And you are right, the smell is universally recognized.
Let's look at the bread. If you are buying standard pre-sliced white or wheat bread for making sandwiches, we have another specific container or quantity word to learn. You do not buy a bread. What do you buy?
You buy a loaf of bread.
Exactly, a loaf. Now, loaf is a very interesting noun for English learners because it has an irregular plural form. If you buy one, it is a loaf. If you have a large family and you need to buy 2, you do not simply add an S.
The F changes to a V and you buy 2 loaves of bread.
1 loaf, 2 loaves. That spelling change can definitely trip people up. So we put our loaf of sandwich bread into the cart. But while we are standing there in the bakery looking at all the beautiful fresh pastries, we see a display of huge, soft chocolate chip cookies.
Now let's look at our shopping list. Bread is on the list, milk is on the list, carrots are on the list, the cookies are definitely not on the list. This introduces a really fun cultural and vocabulary concept, the treat.
The treat. This is such a lovely part of the English language. A treat is something special, usually something sweet or indulgent, that you buy simply for pleasure.
It is not a necessity. You don't need the chocolate cookies to survive, but you buy them to make yourself happy.
It is the ultimate impulse buy. You see it, it looks good, and you think, you know what? I deserve a little treat today.
And that internal dialogue, deciding to stray from the rigid shopping list to buy a small treat, is a universal experience. It is what makes the supermarket a human experience, not just a robotic chore.
The word treat can also be used as a verb, like, I'm going to treat myself to some cookies. It implies doing something kind or generous for yourself or someone else.
So we treat ourselves to the cookies. They go into the cart next to the healthy produce. It's all about balance. From the bakery, we push our cart to the back of the store. We are heading to the meat counter.
Now, up until this point, we have been independent. We've been choosing items from shelves by ourselves. But the meat counter changes the dynamic entirely.
Yes, the meat counter is a high-stakes environment for language learners because it requires direct, unscripted interaction with a native speaker, the store employee behind the glass counter. You have to ask them for exactly what you want.
This is where mastering the language of polite interaction becomes absolutely critical. Let's talk about politeness. because this is something that doesn't always translate directly from other languages.
In some cultures, it is perfectly normal and efficient to walk up to the counter and say, I want 2 chicken breasts, or give me 2 chicken breasts. But in English, how does that sound?
To a native English speaker, starting a request with "I want" or "give me" sounds incredibly abrasive, demanding, and rude. Customer service interactions in English-speaking cultures rely heavily on a foundation of politeness and indirectness. You're asking for a favor, even though you are paying for the product.
So how do we soften that request? What is the standard foolproof script we should use at the meat counter?
The most reliable and polite structure you can use is a modal verb phrase. You start with a friendly hello, and then you say, "Can I please have," or "May I please have," followed by your item. "Hello, can I please have 2 chicken breasts?"
Can I please have? It instantly changes the tone of the interaction. It is soft, it is respectful, and it includes the magic word, please.
It does. Using modal verbs like can, could, or may turns a demand into a question. You are literally asking for permission to have the item, which shows respect for the employee's role. It is a social ritual.
Even if you make a mistake with the name of the meat, maybe you say chicken wings instead of chicken breasts. If you wrap it in the polite framework of, can I please have, the employee will be much more patient and helpful.
Politeness is a lubricant for conversation. It makes everything run more smoothly. So we politely acquire our 2 chicken breasts. As we walk away from the counter, all this talking and shopping has made us realize something: we're getting thirsty.
It's time to head to the next destination to find something to drink. We need to navigate to the center of the store, to the drinks aisle. And I want to pause right here because the word aisle is one of the most famously confusing words in the entire English language.
It truly is a spelling nightmare for learners. Let us spell it out carefully. A-I-S-L-E. When you look at those letters, your brain might try to pronounce it as Izel or Ice-ol, but it defies all standard phonetic rules.
So how do we actually pronounce it? Where does our mouth go?
The A and the I combine to make an I sound, exactly like the organ you used to see. The S is entirely silent. It does not exist when you speak. And the L and E make a soft ol sound. So you blend it together, I-ol.
Aisle.
Aisle. It's amazing how many silent letters are hiding in English words.
It is usually due to the historical origins of the word. English has borrowed from French, Latin, and Germanic languages, and over centuries the pronunciation changed while the spelling stayed the same. An aisle, by definition, is the long, narrow path between the tall shelves in the supermarket. Stores number them to help you navigate. So if you are looking for drinks, the sign hanging from the ceiling might say aisle 7.
We turn down aisle 7, and we are surrounded by liquids, water, juice, soda. Since we are thirsty, we want water. And here we encounter another container vocabulary word. We had a carton of milk, a bag of carrots, and now for water, what do we look for?
You look for a bottle of water. This word is typically spelled B-O-T-T-L-E. Now, the pronunciation of this word offers a brilliant masterclass in regional accents.
Oh, this is going to be good. Let's hear the difference.
If you are learning standard American English, the double T in the middle of the word is usually softened. It becomes what linguists call an alveolar flap. It sounds very close to a fast D sound. An American will say bald-ol, a bottle of water.
Bottle. It flows very smoothly.
Yeah.
And what about British English?
In standard British English, the T is enunciated much more crisply and sharply. Bald-hole. Or in some regional British accents, the T is dropped entirely, replaced by a glottal stop deep in the throat, ball.
Recognizing these differences doesn't mean you have to change your own accent, but it massively improves your listening comprehension when you hear native speakers.
That is a fascinating breakdown. A bottle of water.
Hmm.
So, let's take inventory of our shopping trip so far. We have a bunch of bananas, a bag of sour and sweet apples, a bag of carrots that we weighed, a big carton of milk, a half-dozen eggs, a loaf of bread, our special treat of chocolate cookies, 2 chicken breasts we politely asked for, and a big bottle of water.
We have successfully navigated the entire store. Our cart is officially full, which means it is time for the final and perhaps most complex phase of the trip, the checkout.
The checkout is the area at the front of the store where you finally pay for everything you have selected. But as you push your heavy cart toward the cash registers, you are faced with a very important decision. You have to choose which lane or line to get into.
And supermarkets have a specific lane designed for speed, called the express lane.
The express lane. You will always see a brightly lit sign hanging above this specific register. It usually says something very specific, 10 items or less.
Now, let's connect this back to the very beginning of our trip. If we had only a short list, and we chose to carry a small basket, and we only picked up a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a bunch of bananas, that is only 3 items, we could go straight to the express lane.
Yes, the express lane is designed for quick transactions. However, if we look at our cart right now, it is full. We have far more than 10 items. So, according to the rules of the supermarket, we are forbidden from using the express lane. We must find a regular checkout lane and wait our turn.
I want to pause on the phrase, on that sign, 10 items or less. I've heard grammar enthusiasts argue about this specific sign for years. Is it actually grammatically correct?
You have identified one of the most famous grammatical debates in the English language. Technically, strictly speaking, the sign is grammatically incorrect. Items are countable nouns. You can count 1 item, 2 items, 10 items. When dealing with countable nouns, the grammatically correct word to use is fewer. So the sign should theoretically read 10 items or fewer.
10 items or fewer? But I don't think I have ever seen a sign that actually says that.
Exactly. We use the word less for uncountable nouns, like water or sand. You have less water, not fewer water. However, the phrase 10 items or less has become so deeply ingrained in the culture and the language of retail that it is universally accepted, even if it makes grammar teachers cringe.
It is a perfect example of how language evolves through common usage rather than strict rules.
Yeah.
As a learner, you should know the rule, but also know that native speakers break it every day on those supermarket signs.
That is an amazing insight. So we bypass the express lane because we have a full cart and we get into a normal line. We place all our items on the conveyor belt. Now we are face to face with the cashier.
This is the ultimate real English test. It is a fast-paced, highly scripted conversation. Let's break down this cashier role play step by step so you know exactly what is coming. How does it always start?
It begins with a ritualistic greeting. As the cashier starts scanning your groceries, they will almost certainly look at you and say some variation of, "Hello, did you find everything okay today?"
Did you find everything okay? Now let's talk about how to answer this. If I couldn't find a very specific brand of hot sauce I was looking for, is this the moment I should stop and explain that to the cashier?
Generally, no. This is another example of social politeness over literal communication. When they ask, "Did you find everything okay?" they are not usually initiating a deep investigation into your shopping experience. It is a polite formality.
The standard expected response is simply, "Yes, thank you," or "Yes, I did, thanks." If you start complaining about the missing hot sauce, you will hold up the line and create an awkward situation. It is a social script. They read their line, you read your line.
Okay, so we keep it positive. Yes, thank you. While we are saying that, the cashier finishes scanning the bunch of bananas, the dozen eggs, the loaf of bread, and everything else. The machine calculates the price. Now the conversation shifts to the most important part, the money.
The cashier will announce the final price. They might say, "Your total is $32.45.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might use a more casual, connected speech pattern and simply say, "That'll be $32.45.
Notice how they drop the words dollars and cents entirely. 32.45 is much faster and completely understood by native speakers.
That'll be $32.45. So I know how much I owe. Now I have to tell them how I intend to pay. What is the most common phrase to use here?
You want to ask a question to confirm their payment systems. The simplest, most effective phrase is, "Can I pay with a card?" The word card is a catch-all term that refers to either a credit card or a debit card. In modern supermarkets, paying with a card or a tap-to-pay system on your phone is much more common than using physical cash.
Can I pay with a card? Again, using that polite question format rather than demanding, "I will use a card." So
Yeah.
the payment goes through, it is approved. But we aren't quite done yet. There's one more major logistical hurdle. All of our groceries are sitting at the end of the counter. We have to transport them home. This leads to the next question from the cashier.
The cashier will ask, "Would you like a bag?" This seems straightforward, but the cultural context around this question has changed dramatically in the last 10 years.
It really has, because the immediate thought is usually, well, of course I want a bag. How else am I going to carry all this? But why do they ask?
They ask because there is a massive cultural push towards sustainability. Many shoppers now bring their own reusable canvas or cloth bags from home to reduce plastic waste. So the cashier cannot assume you need their bags. You have to confirm it. Now, as we know, we are human. Sometimes we intend to be environmentally friendly, but we forget.
I forgot my reusable bags today. I have said that exact sentence to a cashier more times than I care to admit.
It happens to everyone. So because you forgot your reusable bags, you must answer the cashier's question with a "yes, please." And this triggers the classic, famous American supermarket question. The cashier will look at you and ask, paper or plastic?
Paper or plastic? They are asking what material you want your disposable grocery bag to be made of. The brown paper bags or the thin plastic bags. Let's talk about the rhythm of this phrase, because cashiers say this hundreds of times a day and they say it fast.
They say it incredibly fast. Because of connected speech, the words blur together. The or gets reduced to a tiny sound. It sounds like paper or plastic. Paper, plastic. They don't clearly enunciate the three separate words. If you aren't prepared for that rhythm, it can sound like a completely foreign word.
Paper or plastic. It is so fast. So you make your choice. Let's say we reply, plastic is fine, thank you. The cashier quickly loads your milk carton, your bag of carrots, and your loaf of bread into the plastic bags. The transaction is essentially over. But there is one final formal step before you can take your bags and walk out the door. You need proof that you actually paid for all this food. What do you ask for?
You need to ask for the printed record of your transaction. The phrase is, and can I have my receipt, please?
Let's stop right there. The word receipt. This is another major pronunciation trap, very similar to the word aisle that we discussed earlier.
Yes, the spelling is completely counterintuitive. It is spelled Receippt. It has a P right in the middle of it. But just like the S in aisle, the P in receipt is completely silent. You do not pronounce it at all.
So it isn't receipt. How do we say it?
The stress is on the second syllable, and it sounds like receipt. Receipt. Can I have my receipt, please? The cashier will print the small slip of paper, hand it to you, and conclude the social ritual by saying, here you go. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. You reply, you too. You grab your plastic bags and you walk out the big glass doors where we started. And just like that, you have successfully completed your supermarket trip. But more importantly, you have navigated a complex, immersive English environment.
Let's review the incredible amount of language you just processed. You made a conscious choice between the verbs push and carry when choosing a cart or a basket. You recognize the noun-verb stress difference in the produce section. You utilize collective nouns like a bunch of bananas and irregular plurals like loaves of bread.
You practice sensory adjectives like sweet and sour. You mastered the homophones way and way. You correctly utilized the base 12 dozen system. You successfully used modal verbs to politely interact at the meat counter.
You navigated the silent letters in aisle and receipt. And you successfully decoded the rapid-fire connected speech of the cashier.
When you list it all out like that, it is actually astonishing how much complex language is packed into a simple 20-minute grocery run. It really proves the point that the environment is the best teacher. You don't need to be afraid of supermarket English. It might seem intimidating, but the beauty of it is that the vocabulary is incredibly logical, and the interactions follow a very predictable script.
That is the key, predictability. Every time you go to the store, you are reinforcing the exact same words and phrases. The cashier will always ask if you found everything okay. They will always ask about the bags. The more you expose yourself to this script, the more automatic your responses will become. It moves from active translation in your head to natural fluency.
And that brings us to our call to action for you, the listener. We've talked a lot about what goes into a shopping cart today, but we want to hear from you. We want to ask you the exact question we had in mind today. What is one thing you always buy at the supermarket? Tell us in the comments. We love reading your answers.
Think about your own habits. Do you always grab a bunch of bananas for breakfast? Do you always need a big carton of milk? Or are you someone who cannot leave the store without treating yourself to a small treat from the bakery?
Writing your answer in the comments is exactly like making your shopping list. It activates your brain and solidifies the vocabulary we just discussed.
It is a brilliant way to apply the knowledge immediately. By sharing your essential supermarket item, you are actively participating in the language learning process, moving from passive listener to active user.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the language of the supermarket, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. The next time you realize your fridge is empty and you have to go buy groceries, don't just see it as a chore.
Exactly. Don't view it as a boring weekly errand that you have to rush through.
Try to name every item, aisle, and action in English in your head. When you reach for the handle, say cart. When you feel the chill, think dairy section. When you see the sign, think aisle. Can you turn your weekly errands into your very own immersive language classroom?
The lessons are already there, painted on the walls and printed on the boxes. You just have to unlock them with your attention. The world is your classroom, if you choose to see it that way.
You absolutely can do it. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly detailed journey through the aisles today. We hope you feel confident, prepared, and excited to tackle your next shopping trip. Wishing you very well on your English learning journey. Until next time on English Unlocked.